This is Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Carnuntum Winemaker special series. Produced in collaboration with Wine and Partners and recorded in person at the winery with respected local producers who are themselves deeply rooted in the region. Giving wine students and wine lovers alike access to the minds behind the wines, literally the next best thing to visiting the region yourself. Previously in episode 541, focusing on a tasting of single vineyard wines from Carnuntum's standout 2015 and 2019 vintages. And today in episode 542, focusing on Rubin Carnuntum and the work that continues to support the evolution and communication of zweigelt as a high-quality red varietal. We close out the Carnuntum Winemaker series today in the company of Philipp Grassl and Karoline Taferner of Weinguts, Philipp Grassl and Taferner, respectively. Kicking things off with the pair's origin story. Before exploring regional geology, we get into the Rubin Carnuntum brand development and the underlying quality wine development that it communicates. We explore the regional culture and collaboration between winemakers before connecting this to changing consumer perceptions and price signals, and close out with a tasting of 5 wines: the Weingut Taferner Rubin Carnuntum 2021, Weingut Glatzer's zweigelt Ried Heidecker 2019, Weingut Artner's Ried Steinacker 2020, Philipp Grassl's Ried Schuttenberg 2019, and the Weingut family Pittenauer Beinenfresser Gottelbrunner 2015. For me, a flowing conversational style episode that will put you in the know about Rubin Carnuntum. Enjoy.
Hi Lawrence, I'm very happy to be here on your podcast. My name is Caroline Taferner, and we are here in Göttlersbrunn in Lower Austria in a region called Carnuntum. I'm the owner and winemaker of Taferner Winery. We're a family-owned winery. And we make red wines and white wines, 25 hectares in total. It's a bit more red than white wine, so 60% red wines, 40% white wines. Our focus is on indigenous Austrian grape varieties. So that is our whole focus of the region Carnuntum, and also for us in the winery. We are organic winemakers. That is something that is very special for us here in Carnuntum, and especially in Göttlersbrunn. So most of the winemakers work organic now and or sustainable. That's a big focus for us. And of course, to also show the origin of the vineyard in the glass and in the bottle. My parents started a winery 35 years ago. They still work at the winery, like my grandfather, and I run the winery since last year. So the whole family works together, but we also have a great team of 5 people that work in the vineyard for us. And during the harvest, we have 15 people because we do 100% hand picking. Something that's also very typical for us here is like, hand picking, hands-on winemaking.
My name is Philipp Grassl. We're here at the Grassl Winery in Göttlersbrunn. It's in the most eastern part of Lower Austria, or Austria as a total. It's right between Vienna and Bratislava. And I'm here at the winery since 1998 after an internship in California, and I took over responsibility for winemaking in 1999. And ever since, the winery is growing to the size that it's right now. So we're farming 30 hectares of vineyards organic, and also working with the biodynamic preparation since 2019. So I like the holistic view to get slowly into it. The same ratio probably like at Caro, so it's about 70% of reds, 30% of whites, and also focusing on handmade, terroir-driven wines, low intervention, minimal treatments in the cellar. 90% of the red wine area is planted with the 3 indigenous Austrian grape varieties, Zweigelt, Blaufränkisch and St. Laurent. And for the whites, we do a little bit of Grüner Veltliner, but the most majority of white grapes is planted with the white Burgundy grapes, like Weißburgunder and Chardonnay. And it's also family-run winery, so altogether the size fits perfectly for us because it's big enough to not to have to do it on your own, but small enough to be part in every single step of winemaking. Parents are also still in charge, although they're officially retired. But you need every hand in the winery. So it's good to run it as a family. You're independent. You can do whatever you want, and sometimes hard, but the advantages are better than the disadvantages.
I'll just re-emphasize really what I think came through in the last episode is that I'm so happy to be here in person, and I think see Gottelsbrunn and see the area and really soak it up kind of firsthand and get a feel for the culture as well, I think, and even the things that you've shared and we've discussed which are going to come out later on in the episode. Spoiler alert. I think really do talk to collaboration really in the region and maybe even people supporting each other and maybe not having such an ego of just putting themselves forward. But I think that really the container really and the direction that I guide you both in is actually to talk to I guess primarily Rubin Carnuntum and I believe primarily zweigelt, and I think the reason that I bring that up is that I think it gives us a window really into the last 30 or so years, and I think with you both obviously closely tied to that generation through your parents and your connections there, can share I guess your sense of perspective on those changes and how that name and what that name Rubin Carnuntum actually means and what it's achieved over that time.
Well, before we get to the movement of all the thing, I think it's probably really interesting to see the geological formations, because why is it so good to grow zweigelt over here? Because the thing is that we're here in Carnuntum, which is influenced by the big two mountain ranges of whole Europe, which is the Alpine mountains, which go on till Gottelsbrunn. So all the soils over here are Alpine origin, and then we have at Brellenkirchen starting the Carpathian Mountains. So the Spitzberg Mountain in the east, it's already influenced by Carpathian limestone, and it's also the region is split in two parts. So the western parts where we are located, it's really suitable for zweigelt because we're in a kind of basin that really sunk when the Alpine and the Carpathian Mountains formed around 15 million years ago, and it was flooded with the ancient sea. So in the deep layers you have loam, clay, sand, and those deep layers are very important because in our continental climate we have really warm and dry summers. So those layers deep down, they really preserve a good water supply during the hot summer month. And it's also a point that in Carnuntum everything is dry farmed. We don't have any kind of irrigation, which is very important for the future because water is becoming a very big issue. And due to the soil condition, it helps really much growing really high-quality grapes. And on top, you have the gravel of the ancient Danube River that flooded the whole region after the last ice ages. So the gravel brings us the chalkiness, the minerality, also the drainage after heavy rainfalls. And the combination about that is really a perfect point to grow zweigelt. Because for me, zweigelt is the red pendant to Grüne Veltliner. You can do an easygoing entry-level white wine, you can do mid-layers, and you can get up to the big single vineyard Smaragd wines, probably like you see them in the Wachau region. And for me, zweigelt is quite the same because it's a quite robust grape variety. It needs a lot of nutrition. It needs a good hand in the vineyard because you need to get the yields low. But if you work it properly, you really have a perfect condition in each quality level. So this is probably the thing that Carnuntum is, even due to the climate change, it's getting warm enough to make it ripe, make it really have a good ripeness and good maturity in the grapes. But on the other hand, always have a cool influence due to those deep underlying cool formations of the soil. And this is probably the big spot that we are talking about when we talk about zweigelt in Carnuntum.
I will tell you a little bit about our Rubin Carnuntum because you asked about Rubin. And I also did bring a Rubin Carnuntum with me, which is our most sold red wine. And Carnuntum has a very long history. Over 2,000 years ago, the Romans started making wine here. So it's the oldest wine-growing region in Austria. And it's also the smallest wine-growing region in Lower Austria. And what is very special for Carnuntum, it's the only wine-growing region in Lower Austria that has more red wines than white wines. And even though Carnuntum has this long history, we only became independent in 1992. So under the name Carnuntum, we are a very young wine region. So to make the region popular, in 1992, around 40 winemakers, they came together and they had the idea to create a brand. Mm-hmm. And that brand is named Rubin Carnuntum. Rubin for the color and Carnuntum as the name for the region. Mm-hmm. Just to make the region popular, since it's so young and small and has this special individual point of creating more red wines than white wines in Lower Austria. It's always zweigelt, which is the most planted red grape variety in the region. And like Philipp already said, it's very amazing to grow it here because it's always precise, it's very elegant. It's on the more fresh side, but it's always very depth and has this typical red Rubin color and this great complexity. Even though Rubin Carnuntum is not our single vineyard highest quality, it's always high quality, but it's not our premium red wines. It always has a great price value, easy drinking wine, and very great to pair with foods as well.
And absolutely love that. I think, that again, you've both collectively, set really, I think importantly, the foundations, of Rubin Carnuntum and, talked about, I guess, the potential that was there in terms of the geology. And then the grape on top of that, base material really. And then the Rubin Carnuntum as, okay, that's going to be something, an idea, a visual something that will be memorable, really, and that people can kind of, get on board with and ask for and seek out and look out for. I am quite geeky, I like the geeky stuff, and I know I have a lot of, quite geeky listeners as well. But so what I'm really curious about, and I think it will again match perfectly with what we spoke about yesterday, are actually, what changes there may have been actually kind of behind the scenes during that time, because, again, we spoke earlier to, an increase in quality. We've already introduced, I guess, again, that the potential, the actual, what Mother Nature has kind of given you there. And I'm just curious, are there actually some specific examples that you might be able to share in terms of, how did that quality that we now see in the bottle, what were maybe some of the practicalities and what were some of the changes maybe that took place over that time that have underpinned then the perception and ultimately the quality of the wine going forward?
I can tell you probably because I'm the older one. So not really. It's completely crazy because by looking at the history of Carnuntum over the last 30 years, it's like a time lapse of the whole wine movement in general. So after the 70s, the 80s, where a lot of bulk wine was produced and the quality was low, the prices was low, people drank just to get drunk. It hasn't been a really good time. There was a big scandal in the 80s, and afterwards it was altogether was set on reset. So we started at zero. And we had to build up completely from the bottom. And of course, it was the first, because, by the law, it's a brand, Rubin Carnuntum. But I hate the word brand, because brand is for brand wines. It's not a brand wine, it's a handmade, terroir-driven wine. And for me, Rubin Carnuntum is a wine of identification. Because, as Caro said, we've been an independent appellation since 1992, and the people wanted to show the people outside. The growers wanted to show the people outside, look, this is a bottle, this is a picture, a postcard from this region, this is how it's going on in Carnuntum. And this was the initial start to the whole development. And of course, ever since it started out in the vineyards, because back in the 80s, in the 70s, nobody decreased the yield. So it was a lot of handwork to cut down the grapes. The older growers, they were saying that we're completely crazy and we're going bankrupt and all that stuff. And it completely turned out that this is the right way. So decrease the yields, get better grapes. And there was a big improvement of the quality of the wines. So this was the first step in the vineyard. Then the wineries, they grew. So we started with 6 hectares of grapes. So it was a tiny production. And there was a selection process around the turning of the millennium. So there was also kind of crisis. And a lot of small growers quit producing grapes, quit producing wines. And the ones that were left, they begin to grow, and which is all good for the economic situation of the wineries. And then the new facilities were built up in beginning of 2000 till 2006 or 7. So all the wineries in our region had to build up new facilities because they grew. So they built new fermentation cellars and implemented all the new enology stuff that you had everywhere on the world. And at this time, Carnuntum was a really modern, very focusing on the new world, so focusing on the wines, not so really going out on the terrace. And what I think, what most people, went through is that the more they did, the wines become more exchangeable, more uniform. And after 2010 or 2014, about that stuff, it completely went in the opposite direction. So people turned to organic farming, got back where we started in a vineyard, improved the vineyard production methods, getting rid of bacteria, enzymes. Most of the people here work with indigenous yeasts. So I mean, it's absolutely clear that when you're talking about terroir and you take it seriously, you have to get rid of all that stuff to make the soil speak. And this is the latest movement since 2015, where most of the growers really got completely back, turned to organic growing. As Carlo said, it's 100% hand-picked, which is really rare nowadays. But we really want to focus on that single spot over here and to make it as most authentic that we can do.
Yeah, I agree completely, but maybe on the winemaking side also we recently started using less oak, bigger barrels, not trying to cover the unique taste of the wines with too much oak flavor, and just taking back a bit more and expressing the terroir more than the winemaking.
Sure. And when you say recently, how does that fit into the...
I would say in the last 5 years, 5-6 years maybe, it started, and then for single vineyard wines, and then, it continues with the rest of the wines. So we always try to start at the top with the single vineyard wines. This is where our focus is, and then, sometimes you start there. For Philipp, for example, I know he does the biodynamic winemaking only on this first side, right? And then if it works there, then sometimes you try to copy it and implement it on the other sides.
Where that kind of naturally takes my mind really and my thoughts is again back to collaboration, because I think again it's great we're 3 people sitting at the table here, but I think what you're both also doing is kind of talking to a group, talking to the people that are not present here today. And I think maybe to you, Karoline, I think it would be interesting to understand, because you've just brought up that recent point around, less oak, and as you say, sort of, being slightly more transparent, maybe about the winemaking. Could you give an insight into how kind of information is shared, and which I think practically on a day-to-day, on a harvest-to-harvest basis, I think it gives an interesting insight into how ideas change among the collective.
So there is no formal way, I guess, but you're in a really small town, so only 800 people live here in Göttlersbrunn, but we have 25 winemakers. And some of us are related, like 2 third or second cousins or great-grand cousins, and all of us are friends and went together to school or to university. And so we spend a lot of time together. We drink a lot of wine. We enjoy wines together, not just our own wines, but wines from everywhere around the world. And then, you talk about it. And during harvest, after a day of harvest, we like to drink a beer together and talk about the harvest and share ideas and ask. We are all very transparent and open. If someone asks me how I make the wine, how many months on the lease or which kind of barrel I use, I like to tell people, because it's not a secret. We all cook with water, and there is the thing that is special is in the vineyards and in the soils. And we also have groups that come together, all the winemakers in the town are together in a group. That's a kind of formal group, and also the Rubin Carnuntum group is a formal group. And then we are also part of the Austrian Traditionsweingüter, ÖTW. And that is a bigger group that is not only centered in Carnuntum, but all the wine-growing areas around the Danube River. And we like to share information and talk about the industry and about the wines, and also bring people from other countries, specialists, into the town, and then have talks and discussions. If it's about pruning, it's also about winemaking, it's about new trends, specialists about organic spraying and things like that.
As you say, it's not a massive place. So, and even smaller, I guess, if you've got relatives and friends and colleagues, and all these different ways that you overlap with other people there. And that knowledge, as you say, you're kind of, I guess, informally sharing over a bottle of wine, or in a as you say, tasting each other's wines, tasting wines from outside. Is there somewhere that knowledge actually kind of lives and ends up, or is it more? It's it's sort of oral tradition. It's like shared. It's just understood. It's common knowledge almost between the people within the village and your connections.
Yeah. It's more like you said. It's more like shared. It also comes from generations to generations. If it's about the work in the vineyard, because for all of us it's more than like 2 or 3 generations working together. So from the time you're growing up, you learn about what happens in the vineyard, what to look for. Maybe that's not written in books, but it's like over generations knowledge that you get from past generations.
If I mind to add, the thing is really that we do a lot of, due to those cooperations we have and all the collaboration between the colleagues, we do a lot of tastings together. We do a lot of lessons together. We share, for example, the same bottling line. So it also has economic reasons. And as I mentioned before, I think due to the fact that the history is such a short one, we really came from the bottom. So we found out that if we work together, if we pull on the same string, we get to move more than if we are alone. And this is very, very important for us, and we want to pass it over to the next generation as well, because it's a tiny region. 800 hectares. This is nothing in the global scale. So therefore, we really have to focus on the quality and do our best to lift it up on a better level. Yeah, and I think this is what we really improved over the last 30 years, and it's really ongoing. And we're kind of proud of that. Yeah, because it's of course there's some kind of struggle, and it's not always easy. But we really talk a lot to each other, and it's good to make wine here. Yeah.
So that's great. I mean, I think it's a really interesting insight into kind of behind the scenes in a sense, and again, I think taps into the culture and the community. But of course, then there's also then the kind of outward facing part of that as well. And I asked a question yesterday in the last episode around really the change of perception of zweigelt within the Austrian market, because I think that's interesting for me. I mean, I can sort of speak for the rest of the world, really. I think maybe in a sense we are maybe more of a clean slate, because we hear zweigelt and we're like, wow, that sounds cool. And let's taste some zweigelt. We don't have any preconceptions whatsoever. But my understanding is that I can't even say historically, but even maybe 30 years ago, zweigelt maybe didn't have the respect that it has now, and people maybe thought of it as a simple grape or a part of a blending grape, and I'm just curious, again, your reflections from whatever perspective makes sense, on that change of perception, and obviously with the commitment in the region through Rubin Carnuntum and to zweigelt, I guess the links between the two really.
Yeah, zweigelt. Zweigelt is the most grown Austrian red grape variety, and when it was a cross between Blaufränkisch and St. Lauren, the plan was to make a very yield. You have Dr. Zweigelt to cross these two grape varieties. His plan was to create a variety that has like big grapes, a lot of yield, produce. Yeah, the goal was not to produce the best wines, but to have the most safe yield in the vineyard. And only in the most recent, I would say 25 to 20 years, we focused on single varietal wines, single vineyard, Zweigelt. Even before that, our best wines were mostly Bordeaux blends or international grape varieties. And only recently, in the last decade, we really focused on Zweigelt or also Blaufränkisch as well, as these two grape varieties to show the expression of the vineyard and the expression where they're from, because they come from here and they're crossing from these original grape varieties. That was the focus in the last years, and Philipp already said it. You have to reduce the yield in the vineyard. You have to focus on the sites. You have to look where to grow. If it grows, we have our Rubin Carnuntums that have like a soil that's more like loamy, like with more clay. They produce different Zweigelts than the Zweigelt from our highest sites, like Rittschüttenberg, where you have a lot of gravel and the soil is very different. So depending on where you grow the Zweigelt and how much yield you harvest, also on the age of the vineyard. Zweigelt that is 35 years old produces completely different wines than a young Zweigelt wines, of course. Yeah. So, starting in 2000, we had a special work group called the Zweigelt Work Group, and they focused a lot on the quality of the Zweigelt grape varieties and where to grow our best Zweigelts. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean the thing, due to the fact that it's the most widely planted red variety in Austria, it's not always an advantage because it's planted everywhere. As Caro said, Zweigelt has the intention was to produce a robust grape that is a little earlier ripening than the late ripening Blaufränkisch. It didn't figure out, but the thing is that it's quite robust. It really preserves mainly high yields, and this was the reason why it hasn't been seen as a quality grape variety. But I mean, it's the same for Cabernet Sauvignon or for Sangiovese. If you don't decrease the yields and you don't have old vines, you're not able to produce high quality wines. That's the point. And we are lucky here in Carnuntum that we have some really old Zweigelt vineyards. My oldest vineyard is dating back to 1964, so more than 60 years right now. And seeing that vineyard developing and really seeing how the quality really boosting up over the decades was the intention to really get on single varietal Zweigelts to really show people that it's not growing everywhere and it's not easy going, but also get on top. And once again, the comparison to Grüne Veltliner is quite obvious because Grüne Veltliner always was the easy going, cheap house wine. And if you have good sites, you have low yields, you have very old vineyards, you have perfect Veltliners. I mean, we've proven this, and this is also the situation where we want to go with Zweigelt. And we're lucky that we're able to have those old vineyards still under farming. Yeah.
Okay, and I do have one additional question. I mean, I think that the marketing, the communication, I think this side of things is also fascinating. But I guess as well, to share some, and encourage you to share some insight into the Austrian market, and I think the best place to do that is kind of where the rubber hits the road, which is in terms of price. So again, I'm assuming then, Philipp, your points there around the perceptions and the kind of, as you say, the house wine, perception and feeling towards Grüne Veltliner and Zweigelt, those potentially would really depress the price, and you maybe didn't want to have Zweigelt written on the label because it capped the price of that. And again, I like to keep these questions quite broad. Your take really on how those prices have sort of developed over time, and also maybe what type of consumer is really understanding, is not kind of put off by the Zweigelt label, is understanding the quality that it's possible to achieve.
Sometimes we have customers here, I think both of us, and they try the wines or they want to taste wines, and then they say they want to taste everything but not Zweigelt because they don't like the grape variety. Yeah. And then we give them a single varietal Zweigelt, but it's not written on the label, and they taste it and they enjoy it and they love it. And then when we tell them it's Zweigelt, they tell us, oh, this is completely different than Zweigelt as we had it in our heads. Because Zweigelt can be anything from like fruit forward driven, easy to drink wines, which is also okay, but it can also be like aging potential, very complex wines that we also have here, and that is typical for us here in the region. I guess, of course, the consumers, they realize and they recognize when we produce higher quality wines because they can taste it, and that's also the goal for us. But if you get good ratings, if you are able to place your wines in great restaurants, that also helps with creating higher prices. Yeah, and also if you do like only hand picking and very high quality wines and lower yields, you have to want to try to achieve higher prices so that at the end of the day something is left. Sure, yeah. Because if you only harvest with machines and do mass production, you can of course have much lower prices. But if you work with hands-on and low yields, you have to increase the prices every year a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
But I think compared to other regions, our prices are still very low if you look at the quality of the wines.
I mean, that's also a thing that we especially in Carnuntum, we implemented the pyramid, the whole Carnuntum DSC, because we wanted to get rid of the main focus on the variety. Of course, the variety is very important, but the variety is just the thing that makes the vineyard speak. So what we did in Carnuntum, we implemented the pyramid. So we started the regional wines, get to the village wines, and get to the single vineyard sites. And what we found out that the higher you get in quality, the higher you step on the level on the pyramid, the less important is the grape variety. So on the single vineyard sites, you hardly can find the variety in front, because for us the vineyard is the thing that we want to transport and really to keep on the label. And it's the same for the Rubin Carnuntum. We don't want to. Of course, people know that it's zweigelt, but we want to focus on Carnuntum, on the origin of the grapes, because zweigelt in Carnuntum tastes completely different as it would taste in Weinviertel or in Burgenland. And this is very important for us. On the other hand, it proves that zweigelt still can speak terroir, still can speak origin. And this is what we want to point out. And by implementing the DSC system in Carnuntum, we really found a way to easily give an information to the customer, whether it's a regional wine, it's a village wine, it's a single vineyard. And this is quite young in history, so we started this one in 2018. So it's once again, it's the start of a new development. Yeah.
I'm really interested in all of what you've spoken about there collectively, the geeky behind the scenes stuff, the marketing, the changing of perception, and I think it's we could spend all day. But I think these wines that you've lined up for us wouldn't like us for that. So we're going to now transition into the tasting part, and I'll just echo what I said before. What I love is that you've chosen 5 wines here. One of the 5 for each of your wineries, but you're also going to be introducing and talking about wines from other wineries as well, which again, it's something I absolutely love, and I really think it's a superpower for regions is to really show it's not about an individual, it's not about an individual winery, it's about the region, and it's about the the bigger objective, the bigger direction that no matter what that might be. And I think we're clear on what that is here in Carnuntum. So yeah, it's over to you to take us through the flight. Yeah, to the first wine.
I will start with the first wine, which is a Rubin Carnuntum from our winery, and it's the only wine from vintage 2021, so it's the youngest one. And this is also the only regional wine that we have. And then we will continue with 3 single vineyard wines, and at the end we will have a village wine, which is vintage 2015. So all 5 wines are zweigelt, to show you the zweigelts from our region. All the Rubin Carnuntum wines share the same, here, cap. So it's obviously for everyone that enjoys the wine that this is Rubin Carnuntum, and it's also from the group Rubin Carnuntum. We also have a back label that shows you where exactly we are located in Austria. There is a short story about the wine. And this is, like I already said, our most sold red wine. You can look at the color. It's like dark ruby color with some violet reflexes. Very fruit-forward, fruit-driven wine, but elegant on the palate. Smooth and silk tannins. Alcohol volume percent is around 13 volume percent alcohol. So that's also in recent years another trend that we don't harvest too late. We don't add any more sugar to the wines. I think all of us, it's more the trend to get less alcohol in the wines and not to add more, but just to do minimal intervention. With this wine, it's natural fermentation in a steel tank. And then for natural malolactic fermentation, the wine goes into used barrels for 12 months. And something that's special for Rubin Carnuntum is that we do blind tastings. So all the 37 members, I think it's now, we bring the wine when it's still in the barrel, a barrel sample to a tasting room, and then we taste all the 37 Rubin Carnuntums, and we rate them. So if the wine is a Rubin Carnuntum, or if we see the quality is high enough to be Rubin Carnuntum, we vote for the wine, and the wine has to have a 2/3 yes vote to become Rubin Carnuntum. And there are 2 tastings, one in spring and then once before bottling. And after 1 year in the barrels, we bottle the wine.
I absolutely love that. I think it's it's again super drinkable, and as you say there, I think super fruit forward, and just a great wine. I think the what's also kind of front of mind as well there. You mentioned around this is spontaneously fermented, and could you maybe give a bit of an insight into what other guidance I guess there is in terms of the winemaking? I mean, are most wines sort of naturally fermented, or around the sort of the oak aging, that sort of influence, and in a sense, just to give me a sense of how typical this is of a Rubin Carnuntum.
I think For red wines, most of us do natural spontaneous fermentation for the red wines. For Rubin Carnuntums, I cannot talk for all of them, but I would say most of them are natural fermentation. All of them go into barrels, but everyone can choose if they want to use a small barrel or a bigger barrel, but it's most of the time 100% used barrels. You can also add some new barrels, but we don't want this to be oaky in any kind of way. We want it to be fruit-driven with a nice acidity. Rubin Carnuntum is always hand-picked for all the Rubin Carnuntums, and half of them are organic certified. But the kind of style is the same. Of course, you have a big difference because Carnuntum, there are two main areas, the one that is influenced more by the Carpathians and the one that is influenced more by the Leitergebirge, by the Alps. So you can taste the difference if you look at these two different regions, but Rubin Carnuntum grapes can come from all the 836 hectares of vineyards. Rubin Carnuntum, also the first vintage we had in 1992, and we did a big tasting last year for the 30-year anniversary, and we had a 1992 from Weingut Adner, which was still, I have to say, surprisingly nice to drink. So you can keep it, but we close it with a screw cap. It's more for like practicality, but a lot of wineries also use a natural cork. You can keep it for 10 to 15 years. It shouldn't be a problem. I don't think so, because we tasted them, and we always like to keep some every year back to try and taste them again. But generally speaking, I recommend 5 to 8 years. But if you find it after 30 years in your cellar, you will still be able to enjoy it.
Right now we're turning up to the highest point of the pyramid level. So we go to the single vineyard zweigelt, and we start with zweigelt from Walterklatzer. It's a winery also located in Göttelsbrunn. Also organic winemaking, very low intervention wines, indigenous grape varieties, natural yeast fermentation, of course. All that things that are quite common right now. Because, as mentioned, if we put the vineyards on the label, we want to really taste it after the origin, after the vineyard. So we're tasting Ried Heidacker, which is a quite big vineyard, and it's influenced by a lot of loam and clay. So there's not hardly any kind of gravel over here. So the wines tend to be more dewy, a little bit more palate. And it's 2019, and it's for me a very nice example of a single vineyard zweigelt that really focuses on the fruit and on the palate. So it's not that made on tension, but it's really very dark cherries, nice sweetness on the palate, nice tannins also in the back. And what also happened over the last 10 years is that most of the wineries age their single vineyard zweigelts in 500-liter tonneaus to keep the tension. Because if you have really mature grapes and a lot of supple fruit, you hardly are going into small barriques, because it would make the wines too full-bodied, too much, too overdone. And by turning into 500-liter tonneaus, we get more tension, and it's more specific, and I think it fits better for the variety. Yes, their importer is König Wines in New York, and he was one of the first wineries in Carnuntum exporting wine to the US. I think he started in the 90s already, so very early, yeah. You still have the spices in it, so it's a little bit of white pepper still in it. But you see 2019, I mean, it's 5 years ago right now, you see the whole wine settling down a little bit, getting the fruit more properly, more focused. Regarding to what happens to the wine in the bottle, I think this is a perfect example how it's opening up and how it's getting more on the balanced side. And also still nice acidity on the palate, which is very important because, as mentioned, zweigelt it's starting to ripe quite early, but you have to pick it on a really proper stage. It must not shrivel. The thing is, if you have a hot vintage and it's really getting fast during the picking season, it sometimes tends that the berries lose the juice and shrivel to raisins, and this would be too late. So you have to be really aware to have the right picking date, and this is also one of the big challenges for the future. Picking it by hand on the proper stage. This is the big challenge, because 30 years ago we picked in October, so it had 12 to 14 degrees Celsius, and if you picked it on Friday or you picked it on Tuesday after, it doesn't make a big difference. Right now we're picking at the beginning of September or midst of September. You have 25 to 28 degrees. So if you miss to pick it on Friday, it can be jam on Monday. This is really a big challenge. So it squeezes all together, and you have to really be aware to pick it on the proper stage.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. It's so cool to again put the wines from yesterday. And compare and contrast, and I feel like I'm getting a little bit of an insight into what you were sharing earlier, Carol, about sharing the wines and putting them on the table and letting them talk to you as well. And I totally find all of that expression there. And as I say, just the big thing that I'm finding here is now that it's by itself, it's not part of a blend now. I'm just finding it kind of almost lighter of foot. Then there's less. And again, slightly less, but for me, noticeably less weight in the palate. And when I was talking to yesterday, that kind of jaw filling and cheek filling wines that we sometimes get, the sort of jammy wines that you were talking about there, Philip. This is the opposite of that. It's just so lovely. It's just again so well balanced and so light. And just all those things. It's a pleasure to smell and to imagine and talk about. But the big pleasure is in the drinking, certainly.
We go on with a single vineyard zweigelt from Peter Adner. He's located in Höflein. It's our neighboring village, and the vineyard's called Ried Steinecker. So literally the stony vineyard. So it's on a very high altitude, and it used to be the riverbed of the ancient Danube. Which is really gravelly, lots of stones. If you go there and you look at the soil, you could think that you are in Groß Hermitage. It's really it's a lot of fist-sized gravel galets laying over there. And the thing is also it's located next to the forest. So even if it's quite hot in the summertime, you always get the cool breeze from the forest that really brings down the temperature during the nighttime. And you can easily smell that it's completely different than the one from the loamy sites. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's more herbal. It's more tensionate. Completely different. I mean, the distance between these two vineyards, it's probably 500 meters. It's not that far, but it's a completely different wine. And this is vineyard 2020, as mentioned, from Weingut Adner in Höflein. Also handpicked, of course, aged for 18 months, also in the 500-liter tonneaus. And this is vintage 2020. So it was a slightly cooler vintage. You see it's more fresher on the palate. Mm-hmm. But once again, also those white pepper style on the palate.
I love these descriptions because, again, probably because it's January, I don't think I'll be spending too much time in the vineyards on this visit. So it's great to, again, have a focus of the wine, and then that, I think, opens up for you stories and associations with the specific vineyard, and again, gives a sense of what it's showing us there. But again, I think we're totally in tune here at the table. The wine is bringing us in tune because again, I just noticed, and the word tannin did sort of come to mind there, and just in terms of this being a slightly more structured, slightly less sort of fruit forward, and I think it's speaking to all of those things there around the vintage, around the location, around the forest, etc. But one thing actually that I managed to not ask about across these two interviews has been the actual appearance of zweigelt in terms of its skin and I guess the seed and all of those sorts of things. So I wonder if we could sort of map onto, and maybe this is an interesting wine and an interesting flight to kind of talk about there. What might be some of the, I guess, physiological characteristics of zweigelt that might also influence all of those other factors that you mentioned.
I'll start, and Carol is going to add. Yeah, you will do so. No, the thing is that zweigelt, as mentioned, generally mid-late ripening. So usually we pick it in the end of September, and very thin skins, especially on soils that you have a good water supply. Therefore, it's also used to be hard to get control in wet years, not to have botrytis in the vineyards. By working organic, it's getting better because the vigorosity tends to get a little bit back, and the grapes or the clusters tend to get a little bit more loose. And also, if you go up in altitude, the gravel content is getting higher. So the less loamy, the less earth you have in the vineyard, the smaller the berries are. And right now, it's not a big problem. The thing is that, as I mentioned, you don't want to pick it too late because sometimes it would go to raisins in very hot years. So you have to be really keen to have the right picking spot. And what's also very typical for zweigelt is that the seeds, they hardly turn completely into the brown maturity. So even if you're super ripe and perfect condition, you may find some green seeds as well. It's typical for zweigelt. We don't know why it is, because you don't have it for Blaufränkisch or for Merlot, for example. And therefore you have to be really careful with the extraction. So don't macerate too much. Be more on the gentle style. What we do is that we macerate for a long time, but we only do not an intense pigeage, and we only do 2 times remontage a day, but keep it for more than 3 weeks on the pomace. So it's like a gentle soaking of a tea in comparison. And afterwards, really gently pressing. And it sometimes can be that zweigelt, if you're a little bit too rude or you want too much, it can be a little harsh on the tanning sides, because it's not matching with the more supple and chewy style that you usually have, and it's also not matching with the dark berries, because you expect some sweet tannins. But sometimes this is what we've found out over the last 10 years, that you have to be really keen on the maceration. There's a big impact of the maceration of the wine. And for my winery, for example, we don't crush the berries, so we go in with the whole berries and let the fermentation start within the berry. So what opens up the berry is the carbon dioxide, which is built during the fermentation, and therefore you have a very slow fermentation curve. So it's not going that fast, but you have a more balanced curve, and I think you find it in the wines afterwards. Anything to mention?
Okay, maybe. Yeah. I would like to compare it to Cabernet Sauvignon, since it's the most popular red grape variety, and I think most of your listeners will know. So if you look at zweigelt compared to Cabernet, the clusters are much bigger. There is not that much space in between the berries, so they're closer together. Skin is more delicate. Like Philipp said, it's more soft. Even if you pick it by hand and you look at the boxes at the end of the day, when you empty the boxes, there will be some juice, because the berries are a bit more soft and the skin is more delicate, as I said. Since 2017, I like to use some whole bunches also for our single vineyard fermentation to add some structure in the wines. Because if you add the whole clusters for this, like you said, I haven't seen it in any other grape variety. For us, these raisin berries, I only see it at zweigelt and only at one site for us, which is our hottest single vineyard. And that is very... happens most years now, that you have these raisin shrivel berries and you try to remove them. So adding these whole bunches and the stems adds some nice complexity and structure to the wines.
Yeah, we're tasting Rietschüttenberg 2019 from Philipp Grassl right now. It's my winery. Rietschüttenberg. It's over there. It's literally the gravel mountain. So it also used to be the ancient riverbed of the Danube River. In comparison to Riedsteinecker that we had before, this is one of the youngest sites where the ancient Danube River deposited those gravelly layers. So this is full of limestone, full of chalk, and the wines over there tend to taste really, really tensionate. It's a lot of structure in the wines. It's also the highest altitude, so it grows up to more than 280 meters. And of course, we pick it by hand. Also add some little bit amounts of whole clusters to get more freshness, and also age it in 500 liter tonneaus. And this is our unique single vineyard zweigelt that we Yeah, we started to bottle it in first vintage was 2009, resulting in that group. We started in the beginning of the 2000s. And the most typical thing for this site is that the gravel content is so high, you have so less on earth that the vigorosity is really low, and the grapes don't look like zweigelt grapes because they're really loose, just look more than gooseberries or blackberries. Yeah, and also after malolactic fermentation, the acidity is really, really high. Higher than in all other vineyards, and this gives an additional typical hint of freshness. And this wine can really, really last very long. So the first vintage, as I mentioned, was 2009, and it's still in a perfect condition. And once again, it doesn't taste like any zweigelts you might have ever tasted before. And this is what we want to prove in Carnuntum.
Another example of us getting into the same thought, because again, I was just mentally comparing this to all the Zweigelts from yesterday, and of course from today, and again, it's completely different. I like giving sort of personalities as well to the wines, and I want to say this just feels more serious. It feels less to the kind of playful. It's certainly still fruit forward, but it just feels like it's that kind of mature. Fruit. It's it's for me. It's going more to the darker side, and again, it's I'm sure, when you're struggling in a site up there, things are more serious for you, and it's your life as a grape, and I do certainly feel that here, but again at the same time, it's still retained that freshness, I would say, and still retain that balance, and still retain that lightness of foot. But I would say, almost then more into the sort of contemplative arena. This is certainly one that I'm sure you share with some wine geeks, you share with some sommeliers, and they really go crazy with this, and come up with some fantastic pairings, and this is fantastic.
So last one we take a step back. So we had the regional wines, and then we went up the pyramid to the top for our single vineyard wines, and now we take a little step back to village wines. So village wines come from vineyards, but only from one town, and this one is from Weingut Pitnauer, and this comes from different vineyards in the town of Göttlersbrunn. It is a brand name, and it's called Bienenfresser, which is named after an exotic bird. If you translate it to English, it's bee eater, and this is a very small bird that in winter it stays in Africa, and then in summer comes back, and it lives here in our loess walls. So especially on Schüttenberg, we have a vineyard that's right behind the vineyard. There is a big wall, and they live there in holes in the loess soils, and they eat the bees. So that's how this name came about. This comes from different vineyards around the town, and it's vintage 2015. So this is the oldest one. It's 100% Zweigelt, and this one is for 12 months in barrels. I think it's most new and used barrels. 2015 was one of the best years that we had in Carnuntum. So 2015, 17, also 19, amazing vintages in the last years. It shows like nice expression of Zweigelt. You have a bit of already, compared to the other ones, some aging, maybe spiciness in the nose. But again, also here, the oak is not overpowering. It's a very elegant and fine wine with soft tannins.
I know this isn't from your particular winery, but no, great description. But the question was really more around the village wines. I mean, is it to say that it's a village, and there is therefore slightly more diversity in terms of the sites that people are putting into those, or is it at this point in the evolution that the village wines are themselves kind of picking up their own characteristics and maybe are again coming from particular places?
With the concept of our village wine started with the implementation of the DIC system in 2019, so it's still a very young concept for us. Our winery has a white village wine, which is a blend of the typical white DIC grape varieties, the Burgunder grape varieties and the Grüner Veltliner. To be honest, we're still working on the village wine concept, but for me, and I think for us, it's getting more and more clear the longer we work on it. Village wines sometimes come from the best sites. They are a blend of the best vineyards that we have, sometimes from the younger vineyards before they turn into a single vineyard wine. but I think they're very, very interesting for me because you see the big difference between the villages that are sometimes close to each other but still have a different microclimate to it. Even though our region is small, but still you see difference if you look at the soil because of the long history and the way it's influenced by the Carpathians or by the Alps. So, yeah, I think I see a big future for the village wines in our region.
You've been listening to Philipp Grassl and Karoline Taferner of Weingut Philipp Grassl and Weingut Taferner. Visit grassl.wine and taffy.at, spellings in the description below, where you can learn more about their projects and find their main social media handles. And as Interpreting Wine continues to connect wine lovers and wine producers, why not reach out to them and let them know what you thought of the episode and ask any questions that the episode might bring up. That does bring the Carnuntum Winemaker special series to a close. It's been my pleasure to introduce more wine students and wine lovers to this unique part of Austria via the stories of its winemakers. Sending a huge thank you to all 4 series guests, Joanna Markovic, Christina Netzel, Philipp Grassl and Karoline Taferner. So great to meet you all again in person, taste the wines of the region and share this with the listeners. Also sending a huge thanks to Wine and Partners for your support in making this series happen. And for those of you still listening, I'd love to hear from you with your feedback, suggestions for future guests and series by email at hello@interpretingwine.com. Speak soon.